Wow, what an intro. Thank you. Yeah, I still feel like I'm a new teacher here, so I really appreciate you, Pastor, to entrust me with the mic. I kind of have a little bit of imposter syndrome being up here this morning with you guys. But I came to Pastor Tootin a couple weeks ago and just really felt like there was something I wanted to share. So I'm going to try to get through it this morning. But I'm going to be speaking to you guys this morning about grief. I'm going to be sharing about my own experiences with it over this past year. A lot of you, if you were my student last year, you know where this talk is going. But I'm not sharing this morning because I'm an expert. I'm not sharing this morning because my experience is the best experience for it, or I went through more than anybody else here. I'm simply just up here because I have an experience with it and just hope for those of you who are currently walking through grief or struggle that you can get something from this. Or if you are going to, and unfortunately in the future, you will be walking through a period of grief, sorrow, anger. It's unfortunately, regardless of age, race, gender, this is a foundational human experience. So I'm going to be talking about grief this morning. So I'm going to be talking about my dad. I think we have some pictures of my dad. Work on this. There we go. Yeah, so that's me and my dad on the left, and then me and my whole family on the right. I'm the youngest, so I'm that little chunk there in the teal onesie. 3 older siblings, my mom and dad, and this is really cliche, but my dad really was my superhero. He was my model. Really, so much of who I am today, I attribute to him. And I mean that in the best of ways. There's no goodness in me without what my dad showed me. So we can actually go to the next slide. I think it best shows my dad's character. So there's my dad on my wedding day. If you notice in all these pictures, he just has the biggest smile. That's just who he was as a person. He has that massive smile in my wedding photo because he understands that I'm getting away with highway robbery that day. Really married up. If you've met my wife, you understand that. But then that picture there on the right, that is from his 65th birthday. And without us knowing it, this would be the last time that we were all together as a family. So my dad, to perfectly sum him up, when he turned 60, I asked him kind of jokingly, for some life advice, and my dad just very seriously just said, never take yourself too seriously. And I think that just perfectly summed up my dad. He never took himself, he never took life too seriously. He was always quick with a joke, always had a smile on his face, as he worked 3 jobs. So my mom could stay at home with me and my siblings. Smile on his face as he missed out on my siblings' weddings because of his cancer diagnosis. Smile on his face through all of us moving away and starting our own lives. And then a smile on his face here, even though he was... I think he even knew that his life was coming to an end pretty soon. And so my dad, unfortunately, a little over a year ago, October 2nd, 2022, he passed away after a 2-year battle with stage 4 colon cancer. And so the first point I want to talk about with that experience is... to not try and run when you're faced with this storm of grief or negativity, sorrow, despair, to not bottle it up and bury it or try and run from it. If you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, the Pixar film, I'm very much joy in that movie. I like to just hammer home like happy feelings, happy thoughts, and if I just keep being happy, then that's all I'll ever feel, and all those negative things will stay away. But unfortunately, that only works so well, and what I found in my experience was through my dad's 2-year battle, because I kept just trying to be joy and kept trying to ignore it and run from that storm, I was robbed of a lot of personal growth. I was robbed of a lot of growth in my relationships with my wife, with my siblings, with my friends who were trying to comfort me, and I would just push that away. I wouldn't accept that I even needed comfort. And then when the day finally came that my dad went to the hospital, I was completely stunned, and I shouldn't have been. And it really set me up for a much harder experience and period than I should have had. So my first point is don't run from it, don't bottle it up. And the best advice I got during this time period was my youth pastor came and visited us in the hospital. I had a really good relationship with him. He was actually the officiant in my wedding, and had a really good relationship with my dad. And he came and visited us in the hospital as we were taking turns saying goodbye. And he told us this symbol. I think I have an image for it, but he told us how out west where they get these big blizzards and snowstorms, how when cattle see that storm coming, they try and run. They try and run from the storm. And all that does, because you can't outrun that. You can't outrun that, what's coming. And so they end up being scattered, lost, taking on much more of the wind and the snow and the sleet. But buffalo, what they do is they actually run towards the storm to get past the more dangerous edges of it. And then once in it, they find their herd, they pack in close, and they just hang on through that storm together. And so he gave us that image. He shared that with me and my siblings. And that has been, I think, the most incredible and most life-changing advice for me, was to not run from it anymore, was to just sit in that time of grief that I'm still sitting in, and to just accept it. And through that acceptance, there's so much growth and comfort that can come from that. In fact, I have a passage for that. So in Matthew chapter 5, the Beatitudes, Jesus says, "Blessed are those that mourn, for they shall be comforted." And so if you're not in that, if you're not in a mourning stage, if you're not accepting that grief, that pain, there's no way for you to be comforted because you don't even acknowledge that you need it. And so I found I was very much that cattle trying to run from the storm. Instead, I was just taking on so much more of it by myself. And so that brings me to my point number 2, sticking with that buffalo image, is to find your herd. And that applies for anywhere you are in life. That's not just in times of grief, that's in times of joy, in those middle stages where things are just okay, and in times of grief, pain, whatever. Find your herd to walk with you. These can be your parents, trusted friends, staff here would be happy to be that for you. But just, God has created us to be creatures of community. And we definitely preach that here at Community Church and at Virginia Academy. He calls us to go through life together, to be a herd with one another, to help one another if we're going through times where we're in that storm. With that herd can bring you warmth, bring you shelter, bring you comfort that you can't get otherwise on your own. I find my nature is to kind of isolate and kind of deal with my emotions by myself, and all that did was make it harder on myself, make it harder on those around me who saw me struggling and wanted to help, and I wasn't allowing them to. And so I just found out after my dad passed, I finally just said, you know what, like I can't handle this by myself. And I started opening up more to my wife, to my siblings, to my friends. And what I thought I would be a burden, I thought I'd bring the mood down and make everybody feel sorry for me. But instead what I received was just pure comfort, people who didn't have the right things to say, because there is no right thing to say in those moments, but they were just happy just to be there with me, just hold me, talk me through what I was feeling. And that is a tremendous, tremendous gift to have. Another passage that goes with that is Matthew 18:20, once again in the book of Matthew, where it says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them." So by having people around you, especially people who are going to give you good biblical advice, you are opening yourself up for Christian growth, for comfort from God. And really just that's kind of comfort that you can't find anywhere else. That is foundational, soul-building comfort that you cannot find by yourself, that you cannot find through your own struggling and hoping that you can work it out or figure it out. That is only something you can find through allowing God to work through the others around you. And so one of the biggest things I struggle with, and this is my point number 3, is just to be authentic. And here we have TMO values, and one of our values is authenticity. And I think so much in the church, in my own experiences, we have this nature of wanting to make it seem like we have everything together. You come to church, you dress nice, you have that smile on, people ask if you need prayer, and you're like, no, I'm good. But I would, again, this is good advice for any time, but especially if you're going through a really hard time in your life. Being authentic with others is so important, but most importantly, being authentic with God. I found, and I still to this day have these battles where, I'd be standing there in chapel last year or in church Sunday mornings, and I was just standing there wrestling with God, questioning and confused and hurt and then feeling ashamed because I had voiced those with God. And who am I to question or to be upset with God? He's given me a wonderful dad who it hurts to lose. Like, that's a tremendous blessing. And finally, I was just happened to be scrolling through Reels, like I'm sure a lot of you guys do. When you get home from school, you're kind of brain dead and just want to turn your brain off. And I was just scrolling through Reels looking for some things to laugh at. And all of a sudden I just got hit with this video from a modern theologian, Tim Keller, who was talking about the book of Job, which if you're ever going through a time of grief or pain or sorrow, as a Christian, it seems like the book of Job is like the natural first place you go to. That's the poster child of it. And he was talking about, and he talked about how Christianity is not stoicism. Like, we have this idea that Christianity, you just need to be always just here, always just good. And he was saying Christianity is not stoicism, right? God created us to be complex creatures with complex emotions and experiences, and to just pretend that you're always this stoic, good person is inauthentic and the exact opposite of what God's created us to be. And so I was reading through this book and listening to this message from Tim Keller. And throughout this book, Job was doing a lot of the same things I was doing in chapel. If you know the book, he was incredibly wealthy, had tons of children and animals, everything by all metrics in his time, good to go, wealthy, set. And was a dutiful servant to God, and because of that, Satan wanted to see if he could corrupt him, and God allows him to basically take everything from him, and he loses his wealth, his children, and so for much of the book, it's just him wrestling with that loss, with that grief, with those struggles, and voicing that wrestling to God. And in that book, a lot of that wrestling I found really reflected what I had been experiencing, and a lot of things I've been feeling shame about, that I was having these times of questioning. And in that book, it says in Job 35:13, surely God does not hear an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it. And so what that passage really meant for me was that, God doesn't want you to just talk to him without any kind of weight behind it, without meaning behind it. Whatever you're feeling, he already knows what's on your heart. He knows how you're feeling, and he just wants you to be authentic with him. And in fact, in that book, by the end, because Job is authentic through his experiences, he's actually rewarded in the end. And I just think there's just so much good that can come from accepting where you are in life and just having that wrestling with God, and through it all understanding that in the end, he does know, he does have a plan, he does know what is best for us, and acknowledging that plan and accepting that it is good and better than anything we could come up with. And so there's so much I would love to share with you about my dad. There's so much about this experience I could talk to you about. And if this is something that you would like to talk to me about, feel free anytime. But if you get nothing from what I have shared this morning, the big takeaway I would like you to get from this is that every single person in this room is going through something, whether you see it or whether you don't. In fact, it's usually the people you don't see struggling that are really probably going through the biggest things. And so what I want to say for that is that you have a tremendous gift and ability every single day to be a positive influence on the people around you who are going through things. If you were my student last year, every single one of you wrote me a card during this time, and I still have every single one of those. I still read them from time to time. And so in that moment, you guys, whether you realize it or not, were a positive light for me when I really, really needed one. When we were in the hospital, we had just been visiting all day. It was during COVID restrictions, so we had to leave at about dinner time. And as we were driving home, we got the call that my dad might not make it through the night and that we needed to turn the car around. And of course, this was against, the hospital wasn't supposed to allow us. And so the doctor who had called us said that he would call ahead, let the doctors know to allow us. They make this exception for us. But for whatever reason, it didn't get through. And we found these doctors, these trained medical officials who deal with this all the time, were really cold to us, really not understanding. And it was not exactly what my family needed in that moment. And in that moment where we're trying to figure out if we can even say goodbye to our dad and my mom to her husband, there was this security guard who, his job was to keep the hospital protected. He probably does not deal with this very much. Definitely probably went to work that day not thinking he would have to deal with this family sprinting in, comforting each other, sobbing. And as these doctors are trying to get us to leave, leave the man that was there for us every single day of our lives, I'll never forget the security guard just came up to us, every single one of us, and didn't know who we are, but he hugged us, and he told us that he'd be praying for us. He was actually wiping away tears and saying that just by our reactions, he understood that what my dad meant to us and what a man he must have been. And every single day since then, I've thought about that person. In such a dark period of my life, that man, whether he realized it or not, made a conscious decision to be a positive influence. I don't even know his name, but that man showed me more in that moment the love of Christ and how he's wanted us to be for each other in that moment than maybe anybody else in my life. And so in closing here, I just want you guys to, as you go through the rest of your day, the rest of your week, the rest of your year, the rest of your life, as you're walking around, passing people in the store, passing your classmates by the locker, just understand that every single person here is going through something, and that you can be that positive light, that comfort to them, a member of their herd. You don't need to have the right thing to say. There is no right thing to say. What you need to be is just a comfort, ears to listen, maybe a hug, maybe a meal, anything along those lines. Do just anything that you can do is enough in those times. So, as we come to a close here, I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to have the teachers come down. I want you guys, if there's anything that you're struggling with, please come down, ask for prayer, find your herd. But also, I'm going to add, and this was really life-changing for me last year as I was praying for a student and really, really struggling. Maybe in my darkest period, the student just looked at me and asked, Mr. Mullen, is there anything that you need prayer for? And for the first time, it was so cool as a teacher to be seen as a human being going through experiences, and that my students recognized that. And so students, as you guys come down and ask for prayer, I didn't prepare the teachers for this, but I would love it if you ask your teacher what they need prayer for. And maybe today you can be a comfort for them, just like they're willing to be a comfort for you. All right, let's bow our heads and pray. Dear God, thank you so much for everyone in this room. I thank you for you bringing them here. I thank you for the community that's been built in the school through these teachers, through these students, and just the opportunities that we have to just build each other up and grow with one another, to be the best examples of your love and of your life. God, I just pray that if there's anybody in this room, staff, teachers, students, going through a time of pain or grief, that you can bring them comfort, that you can put people around them to help lift them up in that, and that you just help them to feel your love and feel your comfort through those people, and help them to grow from this experience closer to you. And I thank you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.